Some of it we might have gone over yesterday. That's fine. You should be able to tell me the answer pretty fast then. For me to take it out of your ear. First learning. So, table 6. What does the 13 in the table represent? So the flies with both the white eyes and standard wings. Right? If your sentence that you have doesn't mention both the white eyes and standard wings, then it's technically incorrect. We learned yesterday that in these two-way tables, that's what they're called, every single box has headings attached to it, 2 headings. So make sure whatever it is that it mentions both. So the one with white eyes and standard wings at the same time. And this was more of a recommendation from me. So we should probably take it seriously. Add a total row and a total column if they don't already provide it for you. So that would be you adding up like what's in the row to get the total that have red eyes. So even these have 2 headings. So if you were looking at like this number in a table, that's my total with red eyes and so forth. Okay, so mention both in your explanations always. Table 7. How many selected fruit fly offspring have red eyes and standard wings? 45. So red eyes and standard wings, that's where they intersect. So that. Table 8. How many selected fruit fly offspring are represented in the table? Anyone making eye contact with me, that's not a good sign. You're not paying attention. Table 8. How many fruit flies are represented in the table? 80. And where did you get that from? How do you know that there's 80?
You plus the forwards of the folding together.
Okay, so adding the 22 and the 58 gives me that row total, which is 80. And this also happens to be when I add a 62 and 18, that's also equal to 80. So if you have a total row and a total column, the amount surveyed is always like where they intersect, where the 2 totals intersect. Also, other people have told me that they added up the numbers in the table. That would just have to be these numbers, the ones with the 2 characteristics at once, like don't add these into that, but those do add up to 80. Also, it did tell you in the description. So that's an easy way for the test to try and trick you, is make you think that you don't have enough to complete your table, because they tell you usually how many they surveyed in everyday language. They tell you like in words. You just have to read it carefully, and that would go here on your table for the totals intersect. All right, so yes, 80 offspring were examined. So the answer to number 6 and 8. Everyone good so far? We know how to read the table. All right, now table 9. How many selected fruit fly offspring have curled wings? It is 22. And that is why adding in a total row or total column helps, because otherwise with just what they gave you, there's no 22 there. So you would have to know to use your critical thinking skills and add those together, the 17 and the 5, to get the total with curled wings. Notice that in number 7, it didn't ask anything about the red eyes or white eyes. So that means you really shouldn't look at those rows. That tells you that your answer is somewhere else, that they don't intersect. the eyes. All right, so good. Any questions? All right, briefly, let's talk about the goal of today and then also just some announcements. So we officially started Unit 3. Your online tests were updated, like your scores for them. I still need to grade the constructive response. So when you see the comment that says the higher of 2 scores given, that's when you know, like, okay, that's my entire score. But yeah, we're on Unit 3 now. If you look on the whiteboard calendar, it's a super short unit. It's the shortest unit all year. There's only 9 lessons. We'll get through the second one today. And by next Friday, you'll already be testing for it. So if there's any unit that you really need to be on top of your stuff, it's this one. Because the policy is you have up to the unit test to get your business stuff done. So that's not as big of a window as it has been in the past. All right, but for the first 2 lessons, we're looking at categorical data, which the unit is 2 variable statistics. So we did statistics in unit 1 as well. Now it's just 2 variables at the same time. You need to be able to calculate missing values in a 2-way table, which we'll do in the next activity. So you'll practice that. You'll be tested that same exact way. Be able to create a 2-way table when the information is given to you in everyday language. And to calculate relative frequencies and describe what they mean in everyday language. I'm recording right now, so you just make sure that you stay on top of your stuff. There are, because it is 2 separate lessons, although it is 1 note sheet, there are 2 separate practices. The first one I think is really easy because again, it's just reading. Can you read and comprehend what's going on? The second one, I think, tends to be more challenging for students, but like it's completely doable. I would definitely prioritize at least the second lesson. This will be one of the last times that I remind you to turn in your binder check if you haven't already, whether you lost points or maybe you were absent, who knows. But anytime I'm not teaching, if you want to show me your binder check, I will check it and I'll update your grade. That should be hopefully 100% for everyone. There's no reason it shouldn't be. And then for the next one, with the unit being so short, it should also be 100% as well. So starting today, don't lose your notes because the next binder check will be next Thursday. Yeah, very short unit. We only have 1 quiz for it, and that'll be this Friday over what we're covering this week. And like I know the whole schedule for the rest of the semester, but I tell you well in advance when you're going to test and when we're planning taking class. So make sure you're ready. I don't hide these days from you. If you're not ready on those days and you mess up your retake, well, like I don't know what to tell you. You need to be ready on the days that I tell you in advance. I did make all the study materials available now, and like I said, it's a short unit. You could learn from IXL. You can see what the test looks like already. Granted, you might only know how to do some of it, but you'll learn it and be ready for the tests on these days. Questions on what I've said so far? Okay, so I did message about that in Parent Square, so make sure you check it and the parents check it. Also, something I put in Parent Square is that I'm not able to have tutoring this Friday after school. So I will be available tomorrow instead after school. But keep in mind, there are other algebra teachers available Tuesdays and Thursdays. That if you wanted help 3 to 4 days a week, you could get that help. It's available to you. We share students all the time. If that's of any interest to you, let me know and I'll connect you with that. Also, there is Saturday Academy this weekend. After this weekend, there's only 1 more for the semester. So if you are failing, you will get like a personal invitation from me, but I encourage everyone to go because it is free tutoring. You'll know later on in life that tutoring is very rarely free. It is actually quite expensive. So just take advantage of all the resources. All right, very last thing to remind you of. If you are interested in this trip, I'm having that informational meeting tonight via Zoom, so get your parents there if that's of any interest to you. Even if they can't attend the meeting, I'm sending the meeting recording to everyone who RSVP. So if you want that information, have your parents RSVP, and then that's all they're receiving. All right, questions, comments, concerns? And all of it's in Parent Square too, but you know. Want to give you all the warnings in advance. So if you haven't done this activity yet, do it now. This is almost exactly like one of the test questions or be asked. So you'll be given a blank table with 9 slots to fill on your test based on the information given. So we have a random set of high school students were asked if they prefer the morning announcements to be shown on video or heard over the intercom. They were also asked if they preferred them during first or third hour. Fill in the table by knowing these facts. So you have some information. You can fill out the whole table. But start with what they give you, and then use your critical thinking skills to fill out the rest. Question right now. All right, I like these. They're kind of like puzzles. So I'll give you about 3 minutes. You do have people at your group that you can collaborate with if you get stuck. In 3 minutes, we'll go over this one that's on the front of your notes. Tell me one thing that you can fill out. So when I call on a table, you're just going to tell me one thing that I can fill out based on the information. There's 9 boxes, so we should get to every table. They want me to put it here. All right, so let's see, where it mentions the 30 students wanted the announcements done in first hour. Do you guys agree that it should go there in the table? Yeah. Okay, I agree. It doesn't mention anything about intercom versus video, so really like these rows shouldn't have the 30 because it didn't mention it for now. So really your only options to put it would be in this row, and it has to be for the first hour. Table 4, give me another box that you can fill in based on the information. All right, so let's read about the 12. 12 students wanted intercom announcements during third hour. So does that make sense? Every single box has 2 headings. It mentioned 2 different characteristics. So yes, that would be more toward this part of our table where it has the 2 different characteristics at once. Good. Table 5, give me another box that I could fill in. 78, where the totals intersect. Because it said a total of 78 students were surveyed. Not that they wanted video, not that they wanted it a certain hour. So that would have to be like a grand total, if you will. Good. Table 6, give me another box that I can fill out. All right, so let's see where it mentions the 56. 56 students wanted video announcements. Said nothing about what hour, so that automatically excludes these columns. So yes, that does go there. So we've exhausted all that they've given us. You still should be able to fill in the whole table using your critical thinking skills. So knowing that like the rows add up to this and that the columns add up to this. You cannot just pick random number. You need to have at least 2 parts filled in for every row or every column to fill in that missing part. So table 7, tell me another box that I could fill in based on what I have on the screen so far. All right, 22 for the total for intercom. So that should be able to figure out for me having 2 of the 3 things in this column. Then you can just do your critical thinking skills. Think, what can I add to 56 to get 78? And if that's not easy for you to figure out, go backwards. 78 minus 56, use your calculator. Yes, it is 22, so that's how you end up filling out the whole table. You need at least 2 things. Table 8, give me another thing that I could fill in. Many people prefer a video when first out. Okay, now, although that may be right, I don't yet have enough information on my screen. Like, I don't have 2 of this column filled out or 2 of this row filled out. So try something else first. Intercom for first hour. Okay, the intercom for first hour is 10 because we have almost the entire row filled out. We know that something plus 12 equals 22, and that has to be 10. Good. Table 9, give me something else we can fill out.
Many people wanted video.
Okay, good. Now we can fill that in because now we have enough information to like definitely say. So yes, 20 plus 10 is 30, so that checks out. Table 1, give me something else I can fill in. 48 for the total for third hour. Because we know that these need to add up to give this total, the row total. So yes, it would have to be 48. And last but not least, what has to be for the third hour that wants video class? 36. All right, so stop beside conversations. You could work it this way. 56 minus 20 is 36. Or you could work it this way. 48 minus 12 is 36. But no, you cannot just randomly pick numbers. It has to work no matter what way you're adding. Questions? Okay, you'll be tested on that. And you just practice it on your homework, practice it on the study guides, and you should get all those points for that one question on your test. All right, moving on now to the back. That's lesson 1. So lesson 1 is really can you bring a table? Can you just fill in the missing parts? Now lesson 2 is about what we call relative frequencies. Take a look at what's at the top of your paper for the lesson 2. This is using the data from the activity we just did. Come up with a few things that you notice and a few things that you wonder. Again, this is the top of the back of your paper. A few things you notice, a few things you wonder. We filled out these parts in the previous activity, but then we get to our relative frequency tables and we notice that they are all decimals. That is because when you hear the phrase relative frequency, your answer should be a decimal or percent. So maybe make a note of that. I didn't tell you what a relative frequency is, but I'm telling you right now, when you hear it asks you what's the relative frequency of blah, 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 it needs to be a decimal or a percent. Now, anyone notice where we got the decimals from at all? Maybe comparing it to the last table we created? Raise your hand if you notice how they created the decimals. All right, any notice about what our highest decimal is? What is our highest decimal in the table? 1. And that's where the two totals intersect. So if you are talking about your grand total, it should never exceed 1 if your answer is a decimal, or 100%. Because again, all of these can be made into percents if I just multiply it by 100%. So relative frequencies are in relation to the whole, or in relation to a certain category. So it might be out of just the people that wanted videos, how many wanted it in third hour. It could be anything. In this whole table, it's in relation to how many were surveyed. So if you are calculating a relative frequency and it's higher than 1 for decimals or 100% for percents, then you did something wrong. Now, anyone know how we create decimals? Person?
Divide it by the total.
So dividing, right? And in this case, if I'm doing it in relation to how many were surveyed, then the way that these were created is by taking the value from that box in the previous activity, 20, and dividing it by however many were surveyed. So these notes that I'm taking, I would highly recommend take them down too. This is how we're creating it. Taking that value from the previous activity, and in this case, we're doing it out of the grand total. Your denominator could change based on the question. Like if it said out of people that wanted first hour, that would change it. Out of people that wanted the intercom, that would change your denominator. All right, but for this relative frequency table, we're taking the numerator or the value from the previous table and dividing it by however many were surveyed. When I do that, I get 0.256 rounded. If I wanted the percent, it would be timesing by 100%. And here's the equivalent percent. So on your test, just look at your answers. So do we want it as just a decimal or does it want it as the percent? Yes, technically this is also a decimal, but I mean, there's a difference. There's a process. Did you just divide it or did you also multiply it by 100%? All right. Any other notices or wonders out there that we'd like to share? Anyone notice that these row totals are still you adding up your numbers from here? Right? Don't these add up to this? And they should also add up to your column totals, but depending on the rounding, like for this one, it's off by like 0.001, but that's because of the rounding. Generally, they still should add up whatever direction you're doing it and make sense in the end. All right, but any questions? Anyone have anything else to add? All right, and this kind of gives us another way to say, like, what's the most popular of the options. So based on this situation, it looks like they should have video announcements during third hour. That seems to be the more preferred method out of all the other ones. All right, questions on this one? All right, good. So now we are going to move on to the next activity where we are practicing the relative frequencies. And we're gonna do it based off of their situation. So 200 people were asked if they prefer dogs or cats and whether they live in a rural or urban setting. The actual values collected from the survey are in this table. We are not going to calculate the relative frequency table yet, because I don't want that to confuse you right now. What we are going to do is answer these 6 questions using the data from that survey. So with our relative frequencies, I mean, I could throw a whole bunch of vocabulary at you, but at the end of the day, you should hear that word relative frequency and know your answer should be a decimal or percent. And really, you just have to read it carefully. Does it want you to divide by your grand total or something else? So work on these 6 questions with your groups based on this data, and keeping in mind what we just talked about for relative. Questions on what we're doing? Okay. So have answers for these. We'll assign a reporter after about 5 minutes. And collaborate with your groups, make sure that it makes sense. So table 5, number 1. What percentage of those surveyed live in an urban area and prefer dogs? Okay, 80%. Anyone get something other than 80%? Table 3? 40%. Anyone get something other than that? All right, so let's see. Your answer should definitely be a percentage. So that kind of reminds you of like the relative frequency. Usually you're dividing something. And it says of those surveyed. It'll always tell you what you should be dividing by. So how many people were surveyed? And that should be my denominator. So remember, the percentage should never be over 100%. So if you have a bigger number in the numerator, then there's something wrong. But it says of those surveyed. So usually any phrases following the word of or among those, given that, tells you what you should be dividing out of. It won't always be the grand total, but in this one it is. So it says of those surveyed, live in an urban area and prefer dogs. So 2 characteristics at once. Class, what should be the numerator? 80, because that is how many have both of those characteristics at once. Right next to this. Now you have to divide in your calculator. So 80 divided by 200 is 0.4, and it wanted the percentage. So that's where you have to, whatever decimal it is, multiply it by 100%, and the answer is 40%. All right, so unlike lesson 1, where it just wanted how many responded this in the survey, we want in relation to the whole, so a relative frequency. Questions on that one? Okay. So then table 6. Among the people surveyed who preferred dogs, what percentage of them live in an urban setting? Okay, 76.9%. Anyone get something other than that? Anyone think that number 2 is asking the same exact thing as number 1?
Yes.
So it's meant to sound similar. But like I said, for these, you just have to read it really closely. It says among the people surveyed who preferred dogs. So not out of everyone that was surveyed, just out of the people that preferred dogs. How many people preferred dogs in the survey? So just out of these many people. And it says what percentage of them live in an urban setting. So how many of those people live in an urban setting? Sure.
34.
So of my people that prefer dogs in this row is where I should be looking. How many of those people live in an urban setting? Okay, so it's 80 divided by 104. So anything that follows among is usually the denominator. And again, it should never be over 100%, so that should be your sign to put it in the denominator. When I multiply that out, or sorry, divide it, you do get 0.769 rounded, which then you multiply by 100%. So yes, this is correct. Make more sense? Got a lot of like, oh, like, yeah, it's not asking the same exact thing. Similar, but not really. All right, table 7. What percentage of people surveyed who live in an urban setting prefer dogs? 59%. Anyone get something else?
7.
0.7?
59.
Oh, 59.7. All right, too many side conversations. I know some of you are talking about this, but we're going over it right now, so your question will be answered. It says, what percentage of people surveyed who live in an urban setting? So how many people live in an urban setting? So of these 134 people, how many prefer dogs? 80. So this is what we are dividing to get our percentage. But it's 80 divided by 134 times 100% is 59.7%. It didn't really say what to round to, but if you were rounding to the whole percent, it would actually be 60%. So just follow whatever rounding rules. But it didn't really specify. So questions on that? Okay. Table 8. How many of the people responded that they prefer dogs and live in an urban setting? So before you say your answer, does this one want a percent? No, it didn't say percent. It didn't say relative frequency. So this is kind of like lesson 1. You're just telling me. So table 8, how many of the people said they prefer dogs and live in an urban setting? 80. Not percent, not decimal. 2 characteristics at once, okay? Table 9. Among the people surveyed, are there more people who prefer dogs or cats? Okay, dogs is correct. Notice it didn't say anything about urban or rural, so really you should not be looking at these columns for that answer. It said of the people surveyed. Dogs is a little more than cats. So yes, dogs for that. All right, last question. So this is where it might be useful in everyday life. This is why we care. This is why statisticians take surveys and figure out what is probably the best option. So your pet food company has access to a billboard in a rural setting. Would you recommend advertising dog food or cat food on this billboard? And then it says, which table did you use to make this decision? We skipped making a relative frequency table. I didn't want that to be too. All you have to do is read it carefully to know what to divide. But, so ignore that part of it. Raise your hand if you think it'd be better to advertise for dog food in a rural setting. Raise your hand if you think the cat food would be better. Okay, good. So even though the cat food or like the cats in general overall are a little less popular than the dogs, it said rural settings specifically. And looking at that, which pet is more popular in a rural setting? Cats for sure. So cat food. And for your reasoning, you could mention your relative frequency. You could say whatever 42 divided by 66 is, and then times 100%. You could say this percentage of people living in a rural setting prefer cats than dogs. So it would make more sense to have the cat food framework. Let me do that math so that I don't have to erase it.
Bless you. Bless you.
Okay. So because 63.6% of people living in a rural setting prefer cats. All right, so to recap, all you have to do is read it carefully to know what to divide by. Anything that follows, like out of these people, among these people, given that, is going to be what you're dividing. Question? Okay. So if you already have your Chromebooks open, which I mean you should because it did have some calculations involved, you can probably knock out your first homework. It's really short. You have more than enough time to appropriately put away your notes so that you don't lose them for this next final check. So do that. You have 2 assignments. They're separate but short for this level.